It has been nearly 30 years since the world witnessed the first ever event by the Ultimate Fighting Championship. Now, when the sport was first founded, it was known as no holds barred, okay? 2 men enter, 1 man leaves, a fight to the death. That is pretty much how this sport was marketed, okay? And in that time, it was too violent for TV. It was too violent for pay-per-view. Porn was allowed on pay-per-view, yet mixed martial arts wasn't. So when Dana White and Lorenzo Fertitta bought the UFC in 2001, they brought in the unified rules of mixed martial arts because they wanted the athletic commissions to sanction the events and for it to grow to what the sport is today. So a lot of rules were brought in, a lot of things changed. However, there are some rules which were brought in because of crazy incidents inside the octagon. And that's what I'm going to show you today. 5 incidents which resulted in automatic rule changes by the UFC. Number 5, 12-6 elbows. Now, a 12-6 elbow sounds pretty self-explanatory. 12-6. From the top to the bottom, 12-6. That's what they call it. And the 12-6 elbow is probably most famous because that is the reason that John Jones now isn't an undefeated fighter. He has 1 disqualification loss on his record when he fought Matt Hamill back in 2009. He was on top of him. He was dominating the fight clearly. He was all over him. He got on top and boom, dropped a 12-6 elbow, opened up a huge gash in his forehead, and the referee called off the fight. But a lot of critics point out that 12-6 isn't even the most powerful form of elbows. Spinning elbows, advancing elbows, up elbows, jumping elbows. These can all generate the same amount of force than what a 12-6 can. But the reality is the people that outlawed the 12-6 elbows know nothing about martial arts and don't know anything about elbows. 2 decades ago, the biggest promoters of the sport, including the UFC and Pride, they met with the New Jersey Athletic Commission to come up with the unified rules of mixed martial arts. Now, one of the commission's doctors had actually seen a fight involving Gan McGee, who is 6'10", and he used 12-6 elbows to obliterate a shorter opponent. And another doctor had been shocked by the knockout and wanted to strike banned. Also, another commission member spoke up. He said that he'd seen a karate demonstration where the karate master had just demolished blocks of ice with 12-6 elbows, okay? And they were like, oh my God, he's breaking ice. We cannot have this. This is crazy. This is lunacy. And anyway, they were all sitting there in the meeting room. Lorenzo Fertitta spoke up and said, listen, everyone stop. For the sake of this, we will not allow 12-6 elbows. They all agreed. And from that moment forward, 12-6 elbows were banned in mixed martial arts. Look, anytime there is grappling involved in a sport, whether it's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, wrestling, sambo, whatever, trying to control an opponent covered in sweat is very difficult. Trying to control an opponent covered in sweat, who's also applied, let's say, a lubricant like Vaseline, that's damn near impossible. And that is what a lot of fighters throughout the history of mixed martial arts have tried to do. In fact, I've been present speaking to people, other fighters, where they've told me some of their methods. They used to say, what I do is I apply the Vaseline to my body 2-3 days before. I allow it to soak in. And then afterwards I shower so it feels like there's nothing there. And then in the fight, when you start sweating, it comes out. As I say, grappling, okay, if you are greasy, if you are lubricated, if you're sweaty as hell, you're very, very hard to control. Now, there's been some famous instances throughout time. I'll take you back now to a fight that happened in Pride with an old opponent of mine, Yoshihiro Akiyama. He went up against Kazushi Sakuraba, an absolute legend, and he was vilified in Japan because he was caught on camera applying 6 bottles of oil of Yule to his body ahead of the fight. But the highest profile example of this has to go to George St. Pierre at UFC 94. Listen, George St. Pierre was the welterweight champion. He was going up against BJ Penn, the prodigy, the lightweight champion. It was a massive fight, and it was the first time that 2 reigning champions had fought each other. Now, between the rounds, on camera, George St. Pierre's trainer, Phil Nurse, rubbed Vaseline all over George's shoulders, stomach, and back. Of course, he's putting Vaseline on because he's going to make you harder to control. Now, George didn't get much of a performance advantage out of this because the commission saw what was going on, and between rounds 3 and 4, they rubbed down his shoulders, stomach, and back with a towel to make sure the lubricant was gone. And everyone, including BJ Penn and Dana White, who was ringside, was absolutely furious at this blatant fouling before the entire world. But his coach's excuse, Phil Nurse, the excuse was this, and get a load of this. He was doing an energy release massage. And listen, that was about as convincing as Vitor Belfort at a USADA hearing. Now, greasing was already a no-no in the rule book. You weren't allowed to do it, but the rules changed because after UFC 94, the UFC and the Nevada Athletic Commission introduced a new policy where fighters' cornermen could no longer apply the Vaseline themselves. You'll see it all the time. When fighters make a walk now, they stop at the prep point. A referee will look at them, make sure they got their mouthpiece in, their cup, all the rest of it, and then and only then does the referee apply a little Vaseline to the nose, the cheeks, and the eyebrows. Number 3, no more Speedos. And rightly so. Look, listen, Speedos, they're a thing of the past, or they should be. No sportsman need to wear them unless you're an Olympic diver or an Olympic swimmer, something like that. You certainly don't compete in the octagon on pay-per-view in front of the entire world wearing a pair of Speedos, okay? My father, on holiday when I was a kid, used to walk around the swimming pool in a pair of Speedos, and he used to give me nightmares, okay? Listen, you don't want to compete in the best sport in the world where there's lots of grappling and pulling and things like that with just a pair of Speedos on. But a modern era fighter did just that at UFC 133. Dennis Hallman stepped into the octagon wearing what appeared to be a small child's swimming gala outfit, okay? Now listen, the cringe for this fight was already bad enough because his opponent, Brian Ebersol, he showed up with his chest hair shaved into an arrow, which pointed down to his private parts. And of course, Dennis Hallman was standing there wearing a pair of Speedos. And this is all fun and games until they start grappling and exchanging in moves and grappling and submissions on the floor. And lo and behold, of course, yes, something popped out of the Speedos. That is the last thing you want to see when you're watching two men grapple one another. Now, afterwards, Hallman explained that he had lost a bet with his training partner. And much to the amusement of his whole team, he felt honored bound to enter the hallowed UFC octagon looking like Magic Mike's backing dancer. But there was one man who wasn't laughing, and that was Dana White. In fact, he gave Brian Ebersol a $70,000 bonus for finishing Hallman in the opening round and getting those horrible shorts off TV as soon as possible.
First time ever, I'm giving out a thanks for getting those horrifying shorts off TV as soon as possible bonus.
Dana actually called the event disgusting and guaranteed that there will be no more Speedos in the octagon ever again. And a rule soon came down where MMA fighters could wear MMA shorts, tie shorts, or if you really wanted to show off the shape of your ass, those long style compression shorts. Number 2, no more groin strikes. Thank God, said everyone, because when the UFC first came around, yes, you were allowed to punch people in the balls, which sounds absolutely madness. And now look, listen, everyone didn't necessarily go out there. Sometimes there was a gentleman's agreement where they said, okay, you know, are we leaving the balls out of this? Because if you don't attack mine, I won't attack yours. And rightly so. I mean, nobody really wants that. Nobody wants to get kicked, kneed, punched, or even elbowed. Nothing. Don't even headbutt me in my balls, okay? Leave the balls out of it, please. And that is what happened, because there was a horrific bollock bashing incident which came at UFC 4 in 1994 when Keith Hackney brutally attacked his opponent's groin, right? You might have seen a video of just 1, 2, time after time, just going to town on those balls, man, just really giving it some. Now, the UFC finally banned groin strikes in 1997, and it was actually in response to a fight that didn't even take place in the UFC. A United States politician, Senator John McCain, actually began using videotape of a fight between UFC veteran Gary Goodridge and Brazilian Pedro Otavio as evidence of how brutal mixed martial arts was. And listen, to be honest, McCain had a point. Now, Goodridge not only kneed Otavio in the nuts, he also squeezed them. And at one point, even put his foot inside his opponent's shorts so he could attack the groin even better. So, of course, this finally forced the UFC to ban groin strikes once and for all. But apparently, no one, including my old mate, Chet Congo. Number 1, no more throwing your opponent over the fence. Listen, that sounds obvious, doesn't it? But you got to remember, this is a sport where they had to bring in a rule for no more bollock shots. Okay, so, you know, stay with me here. Now, listen, 1996, this was the second Ultimate tournament featuring one Tank Abbott. And what happened there was that he scooped up his opponent, Cal Worsham, and just threw him over the side of the octagon. Now, Tank Abbott was an extremely strong man. It was rumored that he could bench press up to 600 pounds, and he also had a college wrestling background. Now, that is exactly what he did. He got a hold of him, he picked him up, and he just launched him out of the octagon. Now, we never learned if Abbott thought throwing Worsham out of the octagon would somehow result in an immediate victory, as if they were in the WWE or something, or if he merely thought that it would look cool and potentially mess his opponent up. But what we do know is that the UFC did not want it to happen again, because they immediately introduced a rule that throwing somebody out of the cage was illegal. And there it is. There is 5 rule changes that happened instantly because of some incident inside the octagon. Let me know what you think down there in the comments. Subscribe, ring the bell. Take care.